Callan Devereux never forgot her. The warmth of her body, the scent of vanilla on his pillow, and the ache in his chest when he woke up alone. No note, no name, just one night, and one secret that would change everything. He sat up slowly in the king-sized bed of his penthouse suite at the Regency Tower, blinking into the golden morning light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Crisp sheets tangled around his legs, an untouched champagne flute on the nightstand. Her perfume still hung in the air, but she was gone. The space beside him was cool now, as if she'd never been there at all. Except she had, and Callan could still feel her in his hands, in his mind, in the places he didn't even know had memory. He wasn't used to this. He was a billionaire, CEO of Devereux Holdings, a man who ran empires, not chase after ghosts. And yet, he was doing just that. 12 hours earlier, the Devereux Foundation Gala had filled the ballroom with champagne, silk, and ambition. Chicago's elite circled like sharks. Donors, board members, politicians, plastic smiles. Callan had barely made it through the first speech when he noticed her. She didn't belong. Not in that way. She moved with quiet purpose, balancing a tray of flutes, her navy dress simple, unbranded. No jewelry, no camera-ready smile. And yet, Callan couldn't stop watching her. She didn't seek attention. She avoided it. She wasn't dressed to impress. She dressed to work. But when her eyes met his across the room, just once, he felt something he hadn't in years. Curiosity. He found her later, off to the side, near the empty service hallway behind the catering table. No one else noticed her, but Callan did. "You shouldn't be back here," she said softly, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Neither should you," he replied. No names were exchanged. No titles. No last names. Only lips. It started with silence and ended in his penthouse. One bed, one night, one mystery. She didn't cry. She didn't cling. She didn't linger. He hadn't been touched like that in years. And now she was gone. Callan stood, pulling on a shirt, pacing across the marble floor with restless energy. He checked the elevators, the cameras. Nothing. The building's concierge said she slipped out before sunrise. Quiet. Alone. No ID was recorded. She left no trail. Callan didn't understand why it bothered him so much. He wasn't sentimental. He had women before. Beautiful ones. Famous ones. Smart ones. But her? She left a mark deeper than any of them. Later that day, he sat through a merger meeting on autopilot. The financials blurred. His CFO noticed his distraction. "You good?" she whispered. He blinked. Yeah, he wasn't, because every time he looked at a woman in the room, he kept comparing her to the one who'd vanished without a trace. Callan didn't even know her name. That night, he returned to the gala venue. He spoke to the catering manager. "We cycle staff weekly," the man said. "She wasn't one of ours. Could have been a last-minute sub. We don't keep all the names." Callan offered him $5,000 in cash. Still no name. He left, irritated, unsure why he even cared this much. It wasn't love. That would be absurd. But it wasn't lust, either. That he would have forgotten by now. It was the look in her eyes. One part sadness, one part steel. Like she'd survived something and wasn't letting it define her. He didn't just want her name anymore. He wanted the story behind her silence. Across the city, in a shared apartment above a laundromat, Zaria Monroe folded her uniform slowly. She stared at the hospital slip in her hand, small, square, unforgiving. Pregnant. She bit her lip to stop the shaking. There would be no calls, no demands, no drama. She wouldn't ask for anything, because one night was all it took. And now, she had a secret to carry, alone. Callan hadn't always lived like this, guarded, cold, impenetrable. But power made distance necessary, and he'd learned early that intimacy came with a cost. Everyone wanted something, a position, a headline, a favor, sometimes a last name. But she hadn't. She'd wanted nothing. That's what haunted him. The night she slipped into his life, it felt like a dream. Now, it felt like a loss. The kind that scratched at his ribs and settled under his skin. He didn't even know why. She was no one, and yet she was everywhere. On his pillow, in the silence of his penthouse, in the space between thoughts, when his mind should have been focused on million-dollar decisions. His assistant tapped on the doorframe of his glass office, clearing her throat. "You have a lunch meeting in 20 minutes. He nodded without lifting his eyes from the skyline. She hesitated. "Should I reschedule?" He looked up then, face unreadable. "No, I'll go." But he didn't remember a single word from that lunch. The investor across from him droned on about forecasts and shareholder reports, while Callan's mind played loops of a faceless woman's touch. The way she didn't hesitate when she kissed him. The quiet strength in the way she looked at him when he leaned in that night. The way she seemed to have made peace with being invisible. That wasn't something you could fake. She didn't want anything from him, and he'd been too self-absorbed to realize the value of that in real time. Now? Now he'd pay anything to relive it, or at least understand what it meant. That night, when he returned to the penthouse, the silence was even louder. He opened the closet where she'd hung her coat for a few minutes. Empty. The room looked untouched, too clean, too erased. He went to the balcony and lit a cigar he didn't want. Something was unraveling inside him, something he didn't have words for. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was a deeper loneliness than he wanted to admit. He wasn't just alone, he was haunted. Zaria didn't let herself look back. She couldn't afford to. Not emotionally, not practically. Her days were now a blur of double shifts and tight savings. She didn't know how long she could keep up the pace, but she had no choice. Her sister's treatments were unpredictable, and the hospital bills didn't wait for dreams to catch up. There was no one to call, no safety net, no comforting family circle, just two women clinging to survival. And now, there was something more, something that changed everything. Zaria sat on the edge of her bed, the room dim except for a single lamp. The pregnancy test rested on the nightstand, mocking her silence. She hadn't told her sister yet. She didn't even know how. What would she say? That she let her guard down for one night, and now her whole life was rerouted. She touched her stomach, gently. There was no bump, no sign, just the heaviness of what came next. The father? He didn't know. And she wasn't going to tell him. Zaria had seen what happened to women who got entangled with powerful men. They lost control of their lives. The press ripped them apart. The legal system didn't protect them. Every move became a headline, every mistake a scandal, and she wouldn't put her child in the middle of that. Her own childhood had been unstable enough. She didn't know what kind of man Callan really was. He had been kind that night, gentle even, but kindness could be temporary. She couldn't trust it. She wouldn't ask him for anything, not his money, not his name, not his protection. This child would grow up loved, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. That night, as her sister slept in the next room, Zaria began searching job listings in New York. She couldn't stay in Chicago. Not with him breathing the same air. She had to leave before curiosity tempted her into doing something foolish. 2 weeks later, she packed everything she owned into 2 duffel bags and slipped out of the city. No goodbyes, no announcements, just a clean break. New York was hard, fast and cold, but it didn't ask questions. That's what she liked about it. People were too busy chasing their own dreams to wonder why you walked fast and smiled less. Zaria took temp jobs, lived in a shared apartment, and kept her head down. Her sister joined her after a few months, weaker but stable. They made it work. How? When Miles was born, it was like the world reset. He had her mouth but someone else's eyes, light hazel, piercing and deep. Zaria saw Callan in him every time he smiled or furrowed his brow. But she never said the man's name aloud. Not once. Miles didn't need to know. Not yet. He grew up quiet and observant. He didn't throw tantrums or ask for more than he needed. He was that kind of kid, the one who noticed when you were sad, who rubbed your back when you didn't ask. By the time he turned 6, Zaria had landed a steady job at a boutique interior design firm in Brooklyn. She worked with real clients now, high-rises, condos, curated townhouses. She didn't make a fortune, but it was enough. She was good at it, turning chaos into beauty, making homes feel safe, and she was proud of how far they'd come. Then, one Thursday afternoon, her assistant buzzed her desk. "Hey, a new client just filled out the intake form. Massive budget, premium renovation. Wants to meet in person ASAP." Zaria raised a brow. "Did they list their name?" "Nope. Just the address." She frowned. "That's not normal. Neither is the number of zeros on the estimate." "You'll want to take this one." Zaria opened the file and saw the address, a luxury penthouse on the Upper East Side. She'd heard of the building. A fortress in the sky, home to CEOs and media moguls. This wasn't her usual lane. Still, something in her said go. The doorman buzzed her in. She smoothed her blouse and stepped into the private elevator. Her design book felt heavy in her hands, even though she knew the layout by heart. It was just another job. She told herself that twice. But when the elevator opened and the door swung wide, her heart nearly stopped. There he was, Callan Devereaux, older, sharper, still magnetic. He was dressed in a crisp black shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal his forearms. His hair was slightly longer than before. His eyes, the same stormy steel, landed on her, blank at first. Then something flickered. Recognition? No, not quite. Just a flicker of something he couldn't place. "You're the designer?" he asked, stepping aside. "I am," she said, voice steady despite the pulse racing in her throat. He scanned her slowly, like a man trying to pull a memory from fog. "You've done this before?" "Several times," she replied, walking inside. "I'm here for the job." He nodded, gesturing toward the living room. "I like clean, open spaces, natural textures, no clutter." She nodded, flipping open her portfolio, acting like her whole world wasn't folding in on itself. He sat across from her, one leg crossed over the other, brow furrowed in thought. "You seem familiar," he said quietly. Zaria didn't flinch. A lot of faces in New York. He didn't argue, but he kept looking. And as she talked through colors, layouts, and mood boards, Callan Devereaux sat, still, watching her like a man staring into the past and not knowing it yet. And Zaria? She kept her mask in place, because the man who sat across from her, the one who once touched her like she was, the only woman in the world, had no idea the boy with his eyes called her Mom. Not yet, but soon. Zaria left the penthouse that day with her heart pounding in her chest like she'd just sprinted 10 blocks. She didn't stop until she was inside her Uber, door slammed, the city blurring past her window. Callan hadn't recognized her. That should have brought relief. It didn't. Because a part of her had braced for it. Hoped, maybe, in some twisted, deeply buried place, that he would. That his eyes would sharpen and he'd say her name out loud even though he'd never known it. But nothing came. Just polite instructions and an occasional lingering glance that made her stomach flip. She'd walked into that apartment a stranger and walked out just the same. Except she wasn't a stranger. She was the woman who had once carried his heartbeat inside her. And now she was the mother of the boy who looked more like him with every passing month. She leaned her head against the cold window and exhaled. This wasn't going to be simple. At home, Miles greeted her with his usual quiet excitement, launching into stories about a science experiment and a classmate who got slime in their hair. Zaria smiled through it all, listening, nodding, keeping her thoughts buried deep beneath the surface. That night, as he slept curled beside his sketchbook, she studied him. Same furrow in the brow when he focused. Same jawline. Same exact eyes. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "No one's taking you away from me." She didn't care how rich Callan was, or How powerful. Miles didn't need his world, or so she told herself. 3 days later, she returned to the penthouse. It was supposed to be another simple site visit. Her assistant had already confirmed materials and layout revisions. Zaria had planned everything to be as quick and direct as possible. She wore her hair in a tight bun and kept her blouse buttoned to the collar like armor. Callan opened the door again. This time, he didn't hide the fact that he'd been expecting her. "You always this precise?" he asked, stepping aside. "When I'm being paid to be," she replied, breezing past him. He followed her into the living room, arms folded. "You have kids?" The question dropped out of nowhere. Zaria froze. "What makes you ask that?" she asked, without turning around. He shrugged. "I don't know. Something about the way you organize things, like someone who's used to juggling chaos." She carefully laid her folder on the counter. "I don't mix work and personal life." He didn't press, just nodded slowly, like he was filing the moment away. Zaria got through the meeting without shaking, without cracking. But the second she got home, she locked herself in the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. He was watching her closer now, not because he suspected anything, yet, but because something about her was getting under his skin. And Callan wasn't a man used to feeling off balance. She had to be careful, very careful. The next time she brought Miles to work was a mistake. Her usual babysitter had a family emergency. Zaria tried 3 backup options. All were unavailable. And when she considered cancelling the appointment, her boss reminded her this was a VIP client with the biggest budget they'd ever landed. So she dressed Miles in a clean button-up and jeans, packed his tablet and snacks, and brought him along. "We'll be in and out," she told him in the elevator. "No running, no talking unless spoken to. Stay close." He nodded solemnly. Always the little grown-up. The penthouse door opened before she could even knock. Callan stood there in workout gear, towel around his neck. He raised an eyebrow at the boy standing behind her. "This is Miles," she said before he could ask. "My son. Just for today." Callan's gaze dropped to the boy. "Hi," Miles said, polite but cautious. "Hey there," Callan replied, his voice gentler than usual. Zaria led him inside quickly, directing Miles to sit quietly in the far corner with his tablet. But Callan didn't stop watching him. Miles didn't speak much, but he glanced up from time to time, curious. At one point, Callan asked if he liked to draw. Miles nodded. That was it. But something had shifted in the room. Zaria felt it, the second Callan's expression changed. A flicker of realization, a flash of calculation. He didn't say anything right then, but he didn't have to. Later that night, after Miles had fallen asleep in the back seat on the ride home, Zaria's phone lit up. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a message came through. "We need to talk. Alone." See. Her breath caught. He knew, or at least suspected enough to push. She didn't reply. Not right away. The next morning, he was waiting outside her building. Black SUV, dark sunglasses, unapologetic presence. When she stepped out with Miles, he rolled down the window. "Just you," he said. "Please." Zaria turned to her son. "Go back upstairs to Auntie. I'll be right there." He nodded, sleepy and trusting. She climbed into the car without a word. They drove 2 blocks in silence before Callan spoke. "Is he mine?" Zaria didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead. "Yes." The word was quiet, but it echoed like a gunshot. Callan sat back. His jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "You robbed me of years." Zaria finally turned to him. "You didn't even ask my name." That shut him up. For a long stretch of road, neither of them said anything. The city moved around them, indifferent to the war unraveling in the back of the car. "I have a right to know him," Callan said finally. "You have a right to try," Zaria answered. "But you don't get to barge in and start dictating anything." "I'm not trying to dictate. I just—" He stopped, swallowed. "I need time." She laughed, low, sad. Time? I gave you 7 years. He closed his eyes, leaning back into the headrest. I don't want to fight you. Good, she said, because I won't let him get hurt. I raised him on my own. I won't let your curiosity ruin that. It's not curiosity, Zarya. The way he said her name, finally, after all these years, made something crack inside her. I want to know him. I want to be something real, if he'll let me. She turned to look out the window, blinking back the sting behind her eyes. This won't be easy, she whispered. Nothing worth it ever is, he replied. Zarya didn't sleep that night. Even after Callan dropped her off and she tucked Miles in with his favorite bedtime story, her mind raced. She lay awake long after the city had quieted, staring at the ceiling, every word from that car ride replaying like a loop she couldn't pause. He knew now. There was no hiding it, no more tiptoeing around the truth. The look in his eyes said everything. Shock, disbelief, maybe even a trace of guilt. But more than that, it was what came after that unnerved her most, the resolve. Callan Devereaux didn't seem like the kind of man who let go once he grabbed hold of something. And now that he knew about Miles, he wasn't going to disappear. She got up before the sun, brewed coffee that tasted like sand, and opened her laptop. She scrolled through projects, invoices, floor plans, anything to focus her mind on something else. But none of it held. All she saw was her son's face, and the man who gave him his eyes. By the time Miles padded into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, she'd already packed his lunch and laid out his school clothes. He blinked at her. You okay, Mama? I'm good, baby. Just tired. He nodded, accepting her answer the way kids do, simple, trusting, without question. She kissed his forehead and silently promised him everything would stay safe. But part of her already knew that safety was no longer something she could control. 2 days passed before she saw Callan again. He didn't call, didn't send another message. But on Thursday afternoon, her office receptionist buzzed through. There's a Mr. Devereaux waiting in the front lobby. He says it's important. Zarya didn't move. Should I tell him you're out? The receptionist asked. Zarya closed her eyes. No. Send him in. When Callan entered her office, he wasn't in a tailored suit. No designer shoes or expensive cologne. Just a plain black shirt, clean jeans and tired eyes. She stared at him for a moment. You look human. I feel like one for once, he muttered, stepping inside. Zarya motioned to the chair across from her desk, but he didn't sit. Instead, he walked to the window and stood there, staring out at the street below. I didn't come to make demands, he said after a beat. Then why are you here? He turned. Because I don't know how to do this. And I figured the best place to start is with the person who does. She raised an eyebrow. I don't want to disrupt his life. I don't want to confuse him. I just want to be around in a way that doesn't ruin everything. Zarya watched him. He wasn't faking this. The arrogance, the usual coldness, none of it was there. Just a man stripped bare, grappling with something that mattered more than money or control. I need to know who he is, he continued. Not just the things he likes or how he looks like me. I want to know what makes him laugh, what scares him, what he dreams about when he sleeps. Zarya folded her arms across her chest. Her voice came low. Why now? Callan didn't blink. Because it's the first time in my life I've looked at someone and realized everything I thought I had means nothing compared to him. Silence stretched between them like a held breath. Zarya leaned back in her chair. You don't get to skip the hard parts, Callan. This isn't a contract you sign and get instant access. I'm not asking for instant, he said. I'm asking for a chance. She studied him. The way he stood, not like a CEO, but like a father learning how to ask instead of take. Fine, she said finally. You can start by joining us at the park tomorrow, after school. He nodded once. Thank you. But understand this, she added. If you make a promise to that boy and break it, there won't be a second chance. I won't let you disappoint him the way you did me. His eyes flickered, but he didn't argue. Understood. The park was filled with the sound of laughter and basketballs thudding against concrete the next afternoon. Zarya sat on a bench with a coffee, watching Miles race across the playground with a pack of classmates. Callan arrived 10 minutes late, slightly breathless. Zarya glanced up, unimpressed. "Time's a funny thing, huh?" He gave her a sheepish nod and sat down beside her. "You nervous?" she asked. "Terrified." She smirked. "Good." When Miles spotted them, he hesitated for a beat before jogging over. "Hi," he said, eyeing Callan curiously. "Hey, bud." Callan smiled. "Mind if I hang out?" Miles shrugged. "You play chess?" Callan blinked. "I do." The boy lit up. "We have a board in the rec shed." "I'm not bad." Callan stood. "Let's find out." Zarya watched them walk away, Callan tall and unsure, Miles already explaining his favorite opening moves. It was surreal, like watching two versions of the same spirit try to learn each other. The game lasted 30 minutes. Callan lost, twice. Zarya laughed as Miles came running back. "He's not very good," he declared, grinning. "Don't rub it in," Callan said, catching up behind him. "I like him," Miles told her plainly. Zarya looked up at Callan. So far, so good. Later that night, Miles slept with the chessboard at the foot of his bed. Zarya stood in the doorway for a while, arms folded, heart uneasy. She wanted to believe this could work, that Callan wouldn't disappear again, that he meant what he said, that he'd changed. But hope was dangerous, and love? That was the most dangerous thing of all. Still, she didn't stop him when he texted that night. "Can I see you both again next week?" Her reply was short. Yes. It wasn't a full door open, but it wasn't closed either. It was enough. For now, the first few times Callan and Miles met in public, Zarya kept her distance. Not far, but far enough. She sat at nearby benches, behind books, across from them at the diner, but always with one eye watching. She had to. Her heart didn't trust what her head was trying to allow. Callan was patient, too patient, if she was honest. He didn't try to take over. He didn't flood them with expensive gifts or try to control the pace. Instead, he showed up with chessboards, with curiosity, with quiet. He listened when Miles talked. He asked questions, not to impress, but to understand. It was disarming. Zarya had prepared herself for a man trying to make up for lost time with ego and grand gestures. But this wasn't that. This was different, slower, gentler, and somehow that scared her more. One Saturday afternoon, they were all at the Botanical Garden in Brooklyn. Miles darted between fountains with his sketchpad, pointing out plants and drawing them with his signature focus. Callan watched him from the bench beside her. "He likes patterns," he murmured. Zarya looked up. "What?" "He notices shapes, repetition. He's not just drawing what he sees, he's cataloguing it." She blinked at him. "You got all that from watching him for 5 minutes?" Callan smirked slightly. "I used to be the same way. My mother said I'd rearrange the living room cushions into color-coded groups by the time I was 5. Zarya raised a brow. "You had a mother who noticed." He flinched, not visibly, but she saw it in the tension around his jaw. She noticed everything. She just didn't always like what she saw. Zarya said nothing. She wasn't here to dig into his past. Not yet. Still, part of her wanted to know more. Not about the money or the company, but the man behind all of that. The man whose blood ran in her son's veins. "I'm not trying to rewrite the past," he said quietly. "I know I can't undo what I missed, but I want to build something now." Zarya didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back and let her eyes settle on Miles as he crouched near a bush, carefully sketching a butterfly. "You keep showing up like this," she said, "and one day he's going to start expecting you to." Callan nodded. "That's the point." A week later, it was Miles who asked if they could invite Callan to his school's spring showcase. "He doesn't have to sit with us or anything," Miles said casually, spooning cereal into his mouth. "But it's cool. They're going to hang all our projects on the gym walls. I want him to see mine. Zaria tried to hide her reaction. Miles had never asked about his father, never pushed. And now, this. She nodded slowly. I'll see if he's free. Callan didn't hesitate when she texted him. I'll be there. Tell him I can't wait to see what he made. The night of the showcase, Zaria dressed in simple black slacks and a maroon blouse. She brushed Miles's hair down twice and reminded him to tuck in his shirt. He rolled his eyes, but did it anyway. When they walked into the gym, it was packed. Teachers, parents, excited kids buzzing with sugar and nerves. The walls were filled with paintings, science boards, dioramas. A table with cookies leaned dangerously to one side under the weight of donated snacks. Zaria spotted Callan instantly. He was standing near the entrance, a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. She stared. You brought him flowers? She asked when he approached. He smiled. Well, technically they're for you too. But I figured someone should start treating him like the star he is. Miles beamed. Zaria took a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They moved through the crowd together. Callan kept his distance, letting Miles lead. When they reached his art display, Miles pointed proudly. This one's mine. Callan crouched down to look. The drawing was a blend of city skyline, flowers, and a boy sitting in the middle of it all with headphones on. It's called Quiet in the Chaos, Miles explained. Because sometimes it's loud everywhere, but my brain needs quiet. Drawing helps. Callan looked at him carefully. You're incredible, he said. Miles grinned, embarrassed. Zaria stood a few feet back, arms crossed lightly. For a second, she forgot to breathe. This was working. This was real. Afterward, they all went to a late dinner at a diner nearby. Nothing fancy. Miles wanted pancakes, even though it was nearly 9 p.m. Zaria let him. Callan sat across from them, sipping black coffee and watching like he didn't want to miss a single moment. So, he said, resting his elbows on the table, how would you feel if we did this more often? Like a standing Saturday thing? Miles looked up at his mother. She didn't speak. She looked at her son. Miles turned back to Callan and shrugged. As long as it's not bowling. I'm bad at bowling. Callan laughed. Noted. Zaria smiled. But beneath that smile, she felt a quiet warning start to hum in her chest, because with every visit, every conversation, Callan was finding his way deeper into their lives, and deeper into her heart. She didn't want to admit it, not yet, but something was shifting, slowly. Naturally, he was no longer the cold man from that long-ago night. He wasn't trying to control or dominate. He was present, consistent, humble even. That kind of transformation didn't come easy, and part of her wondered, what cost had it come with? She hadn't asked about his personal life. She didn't know if the socialite fiancé was still in the picture. She didn't know if there were headlines following him. All she knew was that the man sitting across from her, laughing at her son's pancake jokes, wasn't the same man she'd slipped away from 7 years ago. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most dangerous thing of all. Zaria had been careful for so long. Careful not to feel. Careful not to hope. Careful not to imagine a version of life that looked anything like this. But now, the lines were blurring. She stood at the sink later that week, hands in sudsy water, thinking about the way Callan had smiled when Miles called him cool. About how he'd waited outside the school gates, just to say goodbye after the showcase. About the bouquet of flowers that still sat in a glass on her table, slowly fading. This wasn't how she'd planned her life. She never expected to raise a child alone, let alone reconnect with the father years later. And she certainly didn't expect that father to be someone who seemed to be changing. Not for show, but for something real. Still, change didn't erase history. And Zaria had not forgotten how alone she'd felt when she found out she was pregnant. How many nights she cried in silence, holding a stomach that grew while her world shrank. That kind of ache didn't leave easily. She dried her hands and walked into the living room, where Miles was curled up on the couch with a book. He looked up. "Mama," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Always." Why don't you and Mr. Callan talk much when I'm around? She paused. We talk. Not like people who like each other. She blinked. He was watching her. Carefully. He wasn't accusing. He was just curious. Zarya sat beside him. Sometimes grown-ups take time to figure out how they feel, especially when there's a lot of history. Miles tilted his head. Did he hurt you before? She didn't expect that. Her breath caught. No, she said slowly. He didn't hurt me. He just didn't know me. And now he does. Zarya smiled, small and sad. I think he's trying to... Miles nodded like that made sense. Then he leaned his head on her arm. I hope he stays. Her throat tightened. Me too, she whispered. The following Saturday, Callan invited them to the museum. Not just tickets. He arranged a private hour before opening. No crowds, no noise. Just Zarya, Miles and him in a quiet gallery surrounded by light and shadow. Zarya raised a brow when he told her, "This seems excessive." He shrugged. He said he liked quiet. I figured he deserved it. They walked slowly, Miles darting between exhibits, reading plaques out loud. Zarya and Callan followed at a gentle pace. This place used to bore me, he said. When you were a kid, when I was a grown man with no imagination, he said. Everything had to serve a purpose back then. Efficiency, results. I didn't understand stillness. And now? He glanced at her. Now I crave it. She didn't respond. She didn't want to soften too fast. But when they reached the photography wing, she stopped in front of a black and white portrait. Of a mother holding a child to her chest, their eyes closed, foreheads touching. She stared. Callan watched her. He stepped closer, close enough to speak without raising his voice. I've seen you carry everything, Zarya. The weight, the fear, the decisions. And still, you're gentle with him. She blinked fast. Don't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because I don't know what you mean by them. I mean them exactly how they sound. She turned away. Too much, too close. But before she could move, his hand brushed hers, just lightly. It wasn't a grab. It wasn't a demand. It was a question. She didn't pull away. She didn't hold on either. They stood there in the quiet, Miles completely absorbed across the room, while something fragile and electric passed between them. A few days later, her sister asked her the question she hadn't dared to answer. You're falling again, aren't you? Zarya sighed. I don't know. Her sister scoffed. That's not true, you know. You're just scared. Zarya looked at her with tired eyes. I spent 7 years building a world without him. And now he's here, doing everything right, saying all the right things. But what if it's too late? Too late for what? Her sister asked. Too late to love again? Too late to let your son have something good? Zarya was quiet. You always said you wanted him to have what you never had, her sister continued. Well, now he could. A father who's present, who cares, who's trying. Zarya exhaled. Trying doesn't always mean staying. No, her sister said. But shutting the door doesn't guarantee peace either. Zarya hated when she was right. The next time Callan came by, it wasn't planned. It was Tuesday evening. The rain had just stopped. Miles was finishing his homework at the table, Zarya prepping dinner. There was a knock at the door. She opened it, and there he was. No suit, no agenda. Just him. I was nearby, he said. I wanted to see if you needed anything. She stared at him. You thought we needed something? He looked almost shy. I guess I just needed to see you. That disarmed her. She stepped aside. Miles lit up when he saw him. Callan sat at the table and helped with math problems, laughing at wrong answers and celebrating right ones like they were lottery wins. Later, as the night wound down and Miles brushed his teeth for bed, Zarya walked him to the door. You didn't have to come tonight. I know. She hesitated. I'm trying too, she said softly. Callan's eyes searched hers. I see you. and for the first time in a long time, she believed someone meant it. He didn't lean in for a kiss. He didn't push. He simply smiled. "Good night, Zaria. Good night, Callan." When she closed the door, she leaned against it and let out a slow breath. Because she was falling, not fast, not hard, but real, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't terrified. If you've ever tried to protect your heart while still opening the door for someone new, you know exactly what Zaria's feeling. But what would you do in her shoes? Trust again, or guard what you built alone? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video if it touched something in you, and don't forget to subscribe. Your voice keeps these stories alive. It started with a phone call Zaria almost didn't answer. She was balancing fabric swatches in one hand and a half-sipped coffee in the other when her cell buzzed on the counter. She nearly let it go to voicemail until she saw the name. Callan. Her heart paused. She stared at the screen for 2 rings, then swiped. "Hey," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "You busy?" His voice was warm, casual, but lined with something more. "I'm at the studio. What's up?" There was a short silence before he spoke. "I have something to show you." Zaria blinked. "Show me?" "It's not a trick," he said. "Nothing fancy. I want to share something about where I came from." That surprised her. He didn't talk about his past, not the real parts, not the ones without wealth and power and tailored suits. She hesitated. "I'll text you the address," he added, voice quieter now. "If you're comfortable." She didn't say yes right away, but when she ended the call, the text was already there. A street name she didn't recognize in a neighborhood she hadn't visited in years. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she grabbed her keys. The building was older, tucked into a part of Queens most people forgot unless they'd lived there. Zaria parked a block away and walked up the stone steps with quiet curiosity. Callan stood near the edge of the sidewalk, leaning against a lamppost. He smiled when he saw her. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either," she replied. He nodded toward the stoop. This was it. Apartment 3B. Zaria looked up at the cracked bricks, the faded green awning, the iron bars on the windows. "You lived here?" He nodded. "Until I was 15. She turned back to him. "It's humble." "Yeah, that's a kind way to put it." He slid his hands into his pockets. "I shared a room with my mother. She worked night shifts at a warehouse. I'd do homework on the floor while she slept. We ate beans for a week once. I thought that was normal." Zaria didn't speak. He wasn't telling her this for pity. She could tell. He was offering something else. Honesty. Callan looked up at the building again. "She always told me that poverty could steal your body, but pride would keep your spirit alive. I didn't understand what she meant until she died, and I had nothing left but that pride." Zaria softened. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "You don't have to be. I've had more than enough since then. But I realized something after seeing Miles. I don't want him growing up only knowing the after. He should know where people come from. Even me." Zaria nodded slowly. "That's a lot for you to admit. I'm tired of pretending I came from stone walls and stock options," he said. "I came from this." They stood in silence for a moment, both staring at the building that once held a version of him she would never know. Then he looked at her. "I'm not trying to win you over with this. I know. I just want you to see that I'm not afraid of who I was anymore. And I don't want to build a future with someone who has to keep guessing what's real." Zaria swallowed hard. "I'm not used to this side of you." "I wasn't either," he said quietly. "Until recently." Afterward, they walked through the neighborhood. He pointed out old shops, an abandoned basketball court, a community center with faded murals on the side. Zaria listened, surprised by how easily he remembered the details. There was no arrogance in him today, no performance. Just a man revisiting where he was built. Eventually, they ended up at a quiet corner diner. He ordered a slice of peach pie. She stuck to tea. "You know what I envied most when I was young?" he asked, after the waitress walked away. She shook her head. "Families that sat together at restaurants, like this." Zaria tilted her head. "You never did?" "Only once. I was 6. Some church group gave us a voucher. It was a place like this, small, vinyl seats. I remember thinking the food tasted like gold." He smiled faintly. "I've eaten at Michelin-star restaurants since then. But that meal? I still remember how it made me feel." Zaria stirred her tea slowly. "It's never about the food." "No," he said. "It's about who sits across from you." The waitress dropped the pie off between them. Callan slid the plate toward her. "Try it." She hesitated, then picked up the fork and took a bite. Sweet, tart, crumbly, not perfect, but full of warmth. She took another. Callan watched her, and for a second, she forgot everything. Every wall, every rule, every fear. Just a moment, but it mattered. By the time he dropped her off that night, she lingered in his car longer than usual. He didn't ask to come up. He didn't lean in. He simply looked at her like someone who was learning how not to take. "Thank you," she said quietly. Hand on the door handle. "For what?" "For showing me that part of you." Callan nodded, eyes holding hers. "You deserve to know all of me." Zaria stepped out, heart full of questions. But one thing was becoming clear. He wasn't chasing redemption. He was living it. Upstairs, she tucked Miles into bed and kissed his forehead. He was half asleep already, mumbling about a class project and peanut butter sandwiches. Zaria sat at the edge of the bed for a while. She looked at his face. So familiar now. How strange, she thought, that the man she once trusted for one night might become the man who helps raise the child born from it. She didn't know if she could call this love yet, but it was beginning to feel a lot like something close, something that didn't scare her anymore. Zaria didn't mean to fall asleep on the couch, but the week had drained her. Between project deadlines, late-night homework with Miles, and the emotional weight of seeing Callan open up, her body finally gave in. She woke to the soft buzz of her phone vibrating beside her. 1:03 a.m. The screen lit up with a text from Callan. Couldn't sleep. Just wanted to say, tonight meant a lot. She read it 3 times before locking the phone and sitting up. The room was dim. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting soft gold lines through the blinds. Zaria pulled the throw blanket tighter around her shoulders and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Tonight had meant something to her, too. But she wasn't sure what to do with that. It had been years since she let someone in, since she allowed herself to be anything but strong, guarded, controlled. Now, there was this quiet man who used to live in glass towers and boardrooms, standing beside her in diners and walking her through old neighborhoods like he was trying to be someone new. And worse, she was starting to believe he meant it. By the time Saturday came, Miles was buzzing with energy. "Is Mr. Callan still coming with us?" he asked, stuffing his sketchpad into his backpack. Zaria poured his juice and nodded. "He said he'd meet us at the zoo entrance." "Cool," Miles grinned. "He said he wants to race me to the giraffe exhibit." Zaria chuckled. "Please, don't make him run in those shoes." Miles shrugged. "He'll learn." The zoo was crowded, as expected on a spring weekend. Zaria spotted Callan near the main gate, dressed down in jeans, a navy hoodie, and sneakers that looked too new to be trusted. "You ready for this?" she asked when she reached him. "I think so. Not just the giraffe race," she added. "All of this." He looked at her. "I've never been more sure." Miles pulled him toward the map station without hesitation. Zaria followed, hands tucked in her jacket pockets, watching as Callan bent too. Read the map at Miles's height, nodding seriously at every exhibit suggestion. The day unfolded with surprising ease. They moved through sections, fed birds in the aviary, watched sea lions perform, even stopped for overpriced lemonade and popcorn. Miles was in his element, talkative, confident, smiling wider than Zaria had seen in a long time. And Callan? He was relaxed, engaged, fully present. It was almost unnerving. At one point, as Miles climbed on the edge of the otter viewing window, Callan reached out instinctively and placed a hand on his shoulder. Not controlling, just steadying. Zarya noticed, and so did Miles. He didn't flinch or pull away. He leaned into it. Later, as they rested on a shaded bench while Miles drew in his sketchpad, Zarya and Callan sat quietly side by side. "I had a moment today," he said softly. She turned to him. "What kind?" I looked at him, and I saw myself, but better. She tilted her head. "Why better?" "Because he has you." Zarya looked down. "Don't do that," she said. "What?" "Say things like that like they're simple, like they don't land hard." He nodded. "I'm sorry. It's just true." Silence stretched between them, thick with all the things neither knew how to ask. Finally, she broke it. "Are you still engaged?" Callan didn't even blink. "No. What happened? I realized I didn't want a partnership built on branding. I wanted a life that looked like this." Zarya gave a small, unbelieving laugh. "A zoo trip?" He smiled. "No. Something messy, unscripted, real." She exhaled slowly. "And what if this doesn't stay perfect, Callan? What if you get bored, or scared, or distracted by something shinier?" "I won't." "You say that now." "I say that because I've had all the shiny things, Zarya. And none of them made me feel like today did." She looked at him, really looked. There was no performance in his eyes, no arrogance, just truth. The ride home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Miles fell asleep in the back seat, sketchbook clutched to his chest. Callan parked in front of Zarya's building and turned off the engine. Neither of them moved. "Come up," she said softly. He looked at her. "I don't mean for the night," she added. "Just come inside, sit, talk." Callan nodded, understanding. She carried Miles upstairs, tucked him into bed, and left his door ajar. When she returned to the living room, Callan stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. She joined him. "You know," she said, "you never asked me how I managed all these years. I didn't want to make you relive it. But I want you to know." He turned to face her. "I had nights where I cried myself to sleep because I didn't know how I'd pay rent and buy formula in the same week. I walked to 2 jobs because I couldn't afford. A monthly Metro card. I skipped meals. I swallowed fear every time Miles got a fever and I didn't have insurance. And still, I never thought about calling you." His face remained still, but his eyes shone. "Because I thought you didn't care," she added. "I thought I was just a forgotten moment. I didn't even know you existed," he whispered. "That night, you left without a word." "You didn't ask for one," she replied, voice trembling. "You didn't even ask my name." The room went silent. Callan stepped closer. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No," she said. "But you're earning something else." He waited. "My trust." He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. But when she reached for his hand, he held it like it was the only thing that made sense in the world. That night, Zarya didn't kiss him, and Callan didn't try. But they sat together on the couch until the city fell quiet outside the window. 2 people, who once lost everything between them, learning how to rebuild something worth holding, not just for their son, but for themselves. Zarya hadn't planned on looking through Callan's study. She'd only gone in to place the stack of folders on his desk like he asked. He had a habit of leaving mock-ups, paperwork, even receipts scattered around. And she had learned to neatly organize them without digging too deep. But this time, something caught her eye. It wasn't open. It wasn't out in the open either. It was barely peeking from a half-open drawer, an old leather-bound notebook, the edges frayed, the corner tucked beneath a legal pad. She shouldn't have touched it, but her fingers moved anyway. It didn't look like something a CEO would carry. It looked personal, worn, handled often, loved. She flipped it open. Inside were pages of handwritten letters to Miles. The first one dated 6 weeks ago. I don't know how to be a father yet, and that terrifies me. But I've already started thinking about what I want to tell you someday. Zaria stood frozen, eyes scanning the page. You have your mother's quiet fire. She doesn't even know how much power she carries, but I see it. I want you to see it too. Her breath caught. She flipped forward. I bought sneakers yesterday. I haven't owned sneakers in a decade. I'm learning how to be grounded again. She doesn't know how much she's changing me, and maybe she never will. But I'll keep writing. It felt like trespassing. It also felt like the most honest version of Callan she'd ever seen. Not the man with the deep wallet or boardroom charm, but the man writing down words he might never say aloud. She closed the notebook quietly and set it back where she found it. But something in her shifted. That night, she couldn't look at him the same. They were in the kitchen, Callan finishing dishes while Miles sat cross-legged in the living room building a puzzle. Zaria leaned against the counter. You write? He looked over, brow raised. I try. Since when? He wiped his hands and turned toward her. Why do you ask? I found the notebook. He froze. I didn't mean to snoop, she said quickly. It was half out. I didn't read all of it. His voice was calm. But you read some? She nodded. Callan exhaled slowly. He didn't look angry, just exposed. I write because I've always been better at thinking on paper than speaking in real time, he said. I thought maybe one day, if Miles wanted to know me beyond the suits and money, he could read those. Zaria studied him. They're beautiful. He gave a soft smile. So you're not mad? She shook her head. I'm moved. Silence stretched between them again, not uncomfortable this time. Just full. He doesn't know I'm writing them, Callan added, and I don't know when, if ever, I'll give them to him. You should, Zaria said. One day. He met her eyes. What about you? He asked. What about me? Would you want to know me like that? The question hit her in a place she wasn't ready for. She hesitated. I'm trying to, I know. And I'll keep showing up. She nodded, brushing her hand across her forehead. I've spent so many years protecting myself, she said. I don't know what it looks like to let someone in and still be safe. I'm not asking to be let in all the way, he replied. I'm just asking to be let in a little further than yesterday. Zaria stared at him, and for the first time, she didn't feel like he was taking. She felt like he was offering. After Miles went to bed, she stayed a while longer, not out of politeness, not out of duty, because she didn't want to leave. They sat in the living room, her feet curled beneath her, his shoulders relaxed. A movie played on mute in the background, but neither of them was watching. Callan poured her a glass of wine, and they talked. About everything. About his late mother's quiet strength. About her first years in New York, living paycheck to paycheck. About how Miles once locked himself in the bathroom because he thought space needed silence. They laughed. Not the kind of laughter that came from nerves or awkwardness. The kind that made her forget the pain she once carried in her chest every day. When the clock crept past midnight, she stood to go. Callan walked her to the door. Tonight felt easy, he said. Zaria nodded. That's rare. I want to give you more of that. The ease. She looked at him, lips parted, emotions on edge. I want to believe that, she whispered. Callan reached out, but not to pull her in. He brushed his fingers lightly across her hand, his touch gentle, waiting. Zaria didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. She just let the stillness sit between them for a breath. Then 2. Then 3. And finally she whispered, Good night. Good night, Zaria. She walked out without looking back, her heart louder than her footsteps. Because ease was dangerous too. And falling, quiet, slow, real, was already happening. Zaria stood at the window that night, city lights flickering below her. She hadn't bothered turning on the lamp. The dark made her thoughts louder, clearer. Somewhere across the river, Callan was likely pacing his own space. She could feel it. He didn't push. He never did. That's what was different. He wasn't asking for her body. He was asking for her trust. And that required a slower kind of intimacy. one that couldn't be rushed or masked with physical heat. It needed something deeper, but tonight, she didn't want to think anymore. She wanted to feel. The next morning, Miles had a field trip. Zarya walked him to school early and waved him off as he climbed onto the yellow bus. When she turned around, Callan was leaning against his car across the street. "You always just happen to be nearby?" she asked with a smirk. He smiled back. "Sometimes I plan my route with good timing." She walked over slowly. "You busy today?" he asked. "Why?" "I was thinking we could go somewhere." She eyed him. "Somewhere how? Just somewhere that isn't yours or mine. Neutral." She folded her arms. "You've been reading therapy blogs?" "Only the useful ones." She bit her bottom lip, then nodded. "Okay." He took her to a quiet spot just outside the city, a lake house he'd rented for the day. Not a mansion, not showy, just one floor, wood deck, quiet water. The air was fresh, piney, calming. Zarya stepped onto the porch slowly. "This is peaceful. I thought we could use a pause." They sat on the edge of the dock, shoes off, toes grazing the surface of the cool lake water. It was late morning, and the sun cast a low shimmer across the surface. Zarya leaned back on her hands. "I used to dream about places like this," she murmured. "A little house, a quiet life." "What happened?" "Reality," she said. "Bills, work, life. And I think part of me started believing peace like this was something other people got, not me." Callan didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "You know what I used to dream about?" She turned to him. "Noise," he said. "Not crowds, not parties, just voices, family, movement in the kitchen, arguments about dumb things, laughter over nothing. I'd walk through silent rooms and imagine someone was waiting for me in the next one." She blinked. "You were lonely?" "Lonely people don't always look like it, Zarya." Their eyes locked. That moment stretched, quiet, electric, intimate, not loud, not rushed, just presence. They talked for hours, shared favorite childhood snacks, confessed fears. Zarya told him how she used to pretend the stars were angels watching over her when her mother didn't come home for nights. Callan told her how he used to hide in closets just to feel small enough to escape the pressure of being the man too young. She hadn't known that part of him. He hadn't known anyone still cared to ask. By late afternoon, they were inside the cabin. The windows let in golden light. It warmed the wooden floors, casting long shadows and soft halos around them. Zarya stood in the center of the room, arms crossed. "This is the first day I haven't felt anxious in months." Callan was standing near the table, watching her. "That's all I wanted." She looked at him, vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be in years. "If I come closer," she said softly, "will you ruin it?" "No," he whispered. "I'll only match your pace." She took one step, then another, and when she reached him, he didn't pull her into a kiss. He waited. She lifted her hand, fingertips brushing the side of his jaw. His eyes closed, and when they opened again, she was right there, lips parted, breath shallow, permission clear. So he kissed her. Once. Slow, soft, like a promise. No firestorm, no hunger, just stillness. When they parted, she stayed close, their foreheads nearly touching. "I'm scared," she admitted. He nodded. "Me too." They sat down on the couch, curled into each other, not chasing heat, but holding warmth. She rested her head on his chest and let his heartbeat steady her. It wasn't about what came next. It was about finally being still enough to want it together. They drove back as the sky turned violet. No words were needed. Back in the city, Callan walked her up to her apartment. She unlocked the door, then turned. He didn't expect anything, but she leaned in anyway, placing a soft kiss on his cheek. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting me breathe." He smiled, nodded once, and walked away. Zaria closed the door and leaned against it. She didn't feel overwhelmed. She didn't feel afraid. She felt seen, and that, after everything, was the most dangerous feeling of all. Because now she wanted more. Zaria had always believed peace was temporary, a soft moment before the next storm. That's how life had taught her to survive. Expect nothing lasting, and you'll never break. But this new rhythm with Callan, it felt dangerous because it felt good. Too good. He texted in the mornings, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to know how she was. He called at night, just to ask how Miles did on his science test. He remembered small details, the brand of tea she liked, the smell of her favorite, body butter, that she hated being called strong when she didn't feel like it. He didn't show up with flashy gifts or make bold declarations, he simply stayed consistent. And that terrified her more than any lie ever could, because consistency could fool a guarded heart into softening. That Thursday, Zaria had a client meeting on the Upper West Side. It ran long, and traffic crawled through the city like it was moving underwater. By the time she picked up Miles from her sister's apartment, it was past dinner. "You didn't have to wait up," she told him gently. Miles looked up from his book bag, sleepy but alert. "I wanted to see if he'd text." "Who?" she asked, pretending not to know. Miles gave her a look. "Mr. Callan. He said he'd check in after my test." Zaria froze for a moment, keys in her hand. "Oh." She opened her phone. There it was. "Callan. How'd the little champ do? Let him know I'm proud of him, either way." Zaria handed the phone to her son. Miles read it, smiled, and whispered, "He's not like other grown-ups." Zaria swallowed. "No, baby. He's not." Later that night, when Miles had fallen asleep mid-sentence with a comic book on his chest, Zaria sat in the kitchen with a cup of mint tea. She called him. He picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "Just wanted to say thank you for keeping your word. It matters to him. It matters to me too." She traced the rim of her mug. "I'm still learning how to trust this. I know. But I don't want to run from it." A pause. Then softly, "Don't." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she let herself fall asleep without rehearsing an escape. On Saturday morning, Callan showed up at her door with pancakes and groceries. "What's this?" she asked, hair still wild from sleep, one sock half on. "You said you had a rough week. I figured I'd lighten the load." She looked at the bags in his hands, then at his eyes. "You're dangerous, you know that?" "I'm trying to be healing." She rolled her eyes and let him in. They cooked together. Nothing fancy, just eggs, toast, and pancakes from a boxed mix. But it felt like something real. Miles set the table, while Zaria watched the two of them joke about syrup to pancake ratios, like they'd done it a dozen times before. After breakfast, they stayed in, played music, took turns choosing songs. Callan danced terribly on purpose, just to make Miles laugh. And when the boy went to his room to finish a school project, Zaria and Callan sat on the couch, a quiet moment settling over them. She leaned into him without thinking, his arm wrapped around her shoulder instinctively. For the first time, she didn't flinch when he held her. She breathed, deeply, safely, but peace, as she knew, never lasted. On Sunday morning, Callan's phone buzzed. He stepped out onto the balcony to take the call. Zaria wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the sound of his voice carried through the sliding door. It was clipped. Frustrated. "Yes, I've seen the headlines," he said. "No, I don't want them taken down. Let it run." A pause. "I don't care if they speculate. Let them. I'm not hiding." Another pause. "She's not a scandal. She's my family." Zaria froze. Her stomach flipped. She stood, walked slowly to the balcony door, and opened it. Callan turned. He didn't look surprised. "You heard." She nodded. He exhaled. "They found us. Some photographer must have followed me." She didn't say anything. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have told you this might happen." "What did they say?" He pulled his phone from his pocket and handed it to her. Zaria read the headline. Billionaire Callan Devereaux spotted with mystery woman and child. Secret family. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance. But it was clearly them, on the bench outside the museum, miles between them, all three laughing. Her hand trembled slightly. Are they going to come here? Maybe, he said, but I can stop it. She looked up sharply. How? I have lawyers. We can issue takedowns, file privacy violations, block their access. No, she said. He blinked. No? I don't want to hide. He stared at her, stunned. I've been hiding for years, Callan. From you, from the world, from the truth. I won't do it anymore. He reached for her hand. But I also won't let this get ugly, she said firmly. If this is real, if you want to build something with me, with us, then we do it on our terms, not theirs. He nodded slowly. I'm with you. Zaria breathed in deep. The storm was coming. But for once, she wasn't afraid of it. Because she wasn't facing it alone. The media didn't swarm the building. Not right away. It started small. Just a few cameras across the street. A blurred photo on a gossip site, some online whispers. But Zaria knew the machine was waking up. One headline, one post, and suddenly the quiet world she had built was no longer hers alone. She kept Miles home from school on Monday. Not because she was scared. Because she didn't want him to see the world trying to shrink him into a headline. Callan came over that afternoon. He didn't come with security. He didn't come with PR advisors or damage control emails. He came with board games and donuts. When Zaria opened the door, he smiled like he hadn't just been called. A liar, a manipulator, and a secret father by half the internet. Thought he could use a distraction, he said. Zaria stepped aside, letting him in. Miles lit up when he saw him. They sat on the floor for an hour, eating powdered sugar donuts and arguing over rules to a card game no one really understood. Zaria watched from the kitchen, arms folded. She should have been nervous, but instead, she felt calm. Callan wasn't pretending. He was showing up, even when it was inconvenient, even when it cost him. Later that evening, Miles napped in the bedroom. The city lights glowed faintly through the window. Zaria stood by the counter, scrolling through her phone. More headlines, more speculation. The same photo, cropped and reposted like it meant something more than a single moment of happiness. Callan stepped beside her. I can't stop them all, he said. I know, but I can promise you something. She glanced at him. I won't disappear. Her throat tightened. I won't let them frame this like it's shameful, he added. You're not a mistake. Miles isn't a scandal. What we're building, this is mine too. And I'll protect it. Zaria set her phone down. I don't need you to fix the narrative, she said. I just need you to stand in it with me. I am. She looked at him, searching for any sign of hesitation. There wasn't any. Only certainty. Only him. The next morning, a reporter showed up at the studio where Zaria worked. Not with a camera, not with a microphone. With questions. Rude ones. Is the child yours? Were you hiding him from the billionaire? Are you after a payout? Zaria's assistant tried to escort the woman out, but Zaria stepped forward herself. No comment, she said, voice cool but steady. The reporter raised her brow. Nothing at all. Zaria paused, then said, My son is loved. That's all you need to know. By the time she got home, Callan was pacing the sidewalk outside her building. You heard? She asked. I saw, he said. It's already online. I figured they crossed a line. Zaria shook her head. They always will. I want to do something about it. I already did. He blinked. I told the truth. He stared at her, something unreadable moving across his face. You're not hiding anymore, he said softly. No, and you're not afraid. I'm still afraid, she said. But I'm not running. Callan took a step forward. He wasn't the man who once forgot her name. He wasn't the man who closed deals with indifference. He was the man standing here, in the mess, in the noise, choosing her anyway. Zaria didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just reached for his hand. And this time, she didn't let go. Inside, Miles sat at the table sketching. He looked up as they walked in. "Is it over?" he asked. "No," Zaria said. "But we're okay." Miles nodded and went back to drawing. Callan stepped behind him and peeked over his shoulder. The drawing was of the three of them, standing beneath a tree, holding hands. The sky was full of color. No cameras, no questions, just them. Zaria felt something deep inside her chest unfold. Not fear, not resistance, something soft, solid. Hope. She walked to the balcony that night alone, letting the wind push her hair back, the city humming beneath her feet. Callan joined her a few minutes later, 2 mugs in hand. They stood in silence for a while, drinking tea, listening to nothing and everything. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "Not like this. I never thought I deserved it," he replied. They looked at each other. "What happens now?" she asked. Callan set his mug down and stepped closer. "Now?" he said. "We stop waiting for the world's permission. And we start living." Zaria smiled. Not forced, not afraid, free. She took his hand again. Because no matter what came next, she finally believed one thing: she didn't have to do it alone. Zaria didn't know how long she stood in the mirror the next morning, just staring. Something about her reflection looked different. It wasn't her face. She hadn't changed overnight. No new glow. No sudden shift in posture. But there was a stillness behind her eyes that hadn't been there in years. She wasn't bracing anymore. She was breathing, and it scared her a little. Peace always felt like a borrowed thing. She was still waiting for someone to come and snatch it away. But Callan hadn't run. Not after the media. Not after the whispers. Not after she gave him the truth. And now, she could feel herself softening in places she thought had gone numb. That afternoon, they met for coffee on the east side of the park. Callan had picked a spot near a quiet lake where kids fed ducks, and the city felt distant. He arrived first. Zaria spotted him from across the grass, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes squinting into the sun, holding 2 paper cups. He looked content, not like a man fighting headlines or managing a PR crisis. He looked like someone who had chosen peace and meant it. "You're early," she said as she reached him. "You're worth waiting for." She smirked. "You practicing lines now?" "No," he replied. "I stopped needing them with you." She took the cup from him and sipped. Warm, sweet, just right. "How's Miles today?" he asked, reading in his room, drawing between chapters. He said he needed creative silence. Callan laughed. "That's my boy." They walked along the lake path in silence for a few moments. "I spoke to my board," he said finally. Zaria glanced at him. "About you and Miles." Her stomach dipped. "I wanted them to hear it from me before the media tried to spin it again," he continued. "I told them you weren't a liability or a mistake. You're my family, and I won't separate my business from my life to protect people who don't care about either." She stopped walking. "You told them everything?" He nodded. "They didn't clap. They didn't hug me, but they respected it." Zaria blinked. "I didn't ask you to do that. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She stared at him. "I'm not trying to be a public figure, Callan. I'm not asking you to be one," he said. "I'm just making room for you. For both of you. I want the world to know I stand with the truth. With us." Zaria looked down at her cup, then at him. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more." A beat of silence passed. Then she asked, "And if I say I'm not ready?" "Then I wait," he said without hesitation. "But I won't walk away." She swallowed hard. "You don't play fair. I don't want to play at all. I just want you." They spent the afternoon walking and talking, about nothing and everything. Favorite ice cream flavors. Worst high school memories. What Miles had said about wanting a dog. It was quiet, soft, and every minute, Zarya found herself leaning in a little more. Not physically, emotionally. This wasn't just about a man who wanted her. It was about a man showing her he could be trusted to hold what she'd guarded for years. As evening fell, they stopped at a bookstore. Miles had mentioned a title he wanted, and Callan insisted on finding it himself. Inside, Zarya wandered the aisles alone for a while, trailing her fingers along. Spines, breathing in the comfort of stories she hadn't made time to read. When she turned the corner, she saw Callan crouched beside a shelf, holding a book in his hands. He didn't see her at first. He was flipping through pages slowly, reading with his lips barely moving. She stayed hidden for a moment, watching. He looked peaceful again, grounded, a man no longer trying to impress, but trying to understand. And that's when it hit her. He wasn't pretending anymore. This wasn't effort. This was him, and she was falling. Fully. Irrevocably. Later, as they left the store and walked back to her building, Zarya paused at the steps. "You want to come up?" she asked. Callan raised a brow. "You sure?" She nodded. "You said something earlier. About making room." He waited. "I think I'm ready to make some room too." He followed her inside without a word. Upstairs, the apartment was quiet. Miles was still at her sister's for the evening. Zarya set her purse down, turned to him. "I don't want this to be fast," she said. "It won't be," he promised. She stepped closer. "I'm not good at trusting. I'll earn it one breath at a time." She touched his chest, feeling the slow, even rhythm of his heart. "I don't want you to fix me. I just want to know you." Their lips met, not desperate, not rushed, just honest. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders, his hands cradled her waist. They didn't stumble toward a bedroom. They stood in the middle of the living room, kissing like the world had slowed down to make space just for this. No spotlight, no secrets, no shame. Just two people who had finally stopped running and found home in each other. Zarya didn't know how long they stayed like that, wrapped in each other in the center of her living room. The clock ticked quietly in the background. Outside, the city moved as always, cars, voices, life pressing forward. But inside, everything stilled. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about warmth, safety, permission. Callan didn't rush her. His hands stayed respectful, cradling the small of her back, brushing gently along her arms, his forehead occasionally resting against hers, like he didn't need anything more than her nearness. Zarya pulled back first. Her eyes searched his. He didn't speak, didn't press, just waited. "I don't want to be someone's escape," she said quietly. "You're not," Callan said. "You're my landing." Her breath caught, not at the words, but the way he said them. Steady, certain. "I've held everything alone for so long," she said. It got easy to confuse isolation with strength. Callan took her hands, threading his fingers through hers. "You've been strong for everyone else. Let me be strong with you." "Not for you, with you." Zarya exhaled like a weight had slipped from her shoulders. And for the first time, she let her guard down completely. She guided him to the couch, not out of caution, but because she didn't want this to feel like a performance. She wanted to stay grounded, fully present. He sat beside her, still waiting, still watching her like she was the most fragile, precious truth he'd ever been trusted with. She touched his cheek. "I don't want to pretend I'm not scared." "Be scared," he whispered. "Just don't hide." Zarya nodded, then kissed him again, longer this time, deeper, but still slow. His hands rested on her hips, firm but still. When she slipped into his lap, straddling him, he exhaled softly, his grip tightening. Still careful, still asking. She kissed along his jawline, then his neck, her breath shaky, her fingers brushing under his shirt. Callan's hands remained at her waist, still grounded, still steady. "Tell me if this is too much," he murmured. "It's not," and it wasn't. It was exactly right. Her blouse slipped off first. His shirt next. Their skin touched. Warmth meeting warmth. And neither of them flinched. Zarya traced the scar near his collarbone. "What happened here?" she asked. "Got into a fight protecting a kid in my building. I was 14. Thought I was invincible." She smiled. "Some things never change." He laughed softly. Then he touched her back, slowly unclasping her bra, every move silent, gentle, almost reverent. When it slid off, he didn't stare. He looked her in the eyes. "You're beautiful," he said. She believed him. Because he said it without expectation. She leaned into him, their bodies meeting fully, breath to breath, heartbeat to heartbeat. What followed wasn't rushed. It was layered, patient, intimate. Zarya had never known touch like that, anchored in care, not conquest. She wasn't being possessed or conquered. She was being held, learned, understood. And she gave just as much, fingertips exploring, mouth finding softness, skin meeting skin under the hush of evening. They moved together, slowly, like the moment deserved to last as long as it could. And when it was over, they didn't speak. They just lay there on the couch, her head on his chest, his arms around, her body, the weight of 7 years melting into something new. She didn't fall asleep right away. She studied him, the way his fingers traced slow patterns on her back, the rise and fall of his chest, the way his jaw softened when he was at peace. Callan opened his eyes. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded. "More than okay. I'm not going anywhere, Zarya." She didn't ask him to say that. But hearing it unraveled something in her anyway. "You don't have to fix anything," she whispered. "I'm not trying to." She tucked herself in closer. "Just stay. I will." The city outside the window pulsed. But in this moment, on this couch, in his arms, Zarya finally felt what she hadn't in years. Safe, chosen, whole. Have you ever reached that moment where walls fall and what's left is something real? Zarya let her guard down. Callan didn't run, and together they chose something honest. If this moment moved you, let us know in the comments. Would you risk your heart again if someone like Callan stood still long enough to prove they'd changed? Like, share, and don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter is where everything begins. The next morning, sunlight crept softly across the living room floor, spilling over Callan's shirt, still draped across the arm of the couch. Zarya stirred first. She sat up slowly, the sheet tucked over her chest, blinking into the soft light as her mind adjusted to what her body already knew. He was still there. He hadn't left. Callan lay beside her on the couch, arm draped behind his head, breathing slow and even, his other hand resting gently over her hip where it had fallen in his sleep. He looked younger in sleep, unburdened. Zarya smiled to herself, not because of the night before, but because of the morning after. She hadn't realized how much it meant until now, having someone choose to stay after the passion had passed, after the vulnerability settled in. She reached out and brushed his arm gently. His eyes opened. Not startled, just aware. "You're still here," she said softly. "I told you I would be. You did. And I keep my word now." Zarya leaned down, kissed his shoulder, then stood to collect her robe. "I have to make breakfast." Callan sat up, stretching slowly. "I could get used to this." "Don't," she said, smirking. "This might have been the one time I let you sleep on my couch. Next time I'll sleep in the bed." "We'll see," she teased. But her smile gave it all away. Miles returned later that afternoon, bounding through the door with his usual burst of energy. Oblivious to the shift in air between his mother and Callan, but not immune to it either. He hugged Zarya, tossed his backpack in the corner, then turned to Callan with a curious squint. "You're still here?" Callan chuckled. "Good to see you too, buddy." Zarya watched them as Miles sat beside Callan, pulling out a stack of drawings from his backpack. "Look what I made at Auntie's." Callan leaned in with interest. You drew this? Miles nodded proudly. It's a city, but from the top, like a bird flying over it. Callan smiled. It's amazing. You've got a serious eye. Miles beamed. Zarya stood quietly, watching the moment unfold, heart tugging at the edges. This was what she used to watch in movies. Real connection, steady energy, no effort, just ease. But she also knew the world had a way of testing things right when they started to bloom. That evening, after Miles went to his room, Callan lingered near the window. I need to ask you something, he said, voice low. Zarya looked up from the tea kettle. You look too serious for tea. He turned to her. I've been thinking about what comes next, about making this real in the eyes of more than just us. She didn't speak. The words hung in the air like smoke. Callan stepped closer. I'm not proposing, he clarified. Not yet. But I want people to know. I want you on my arm at real events. Not hiding, not shrinking. You're not my secret. Zarya took a slow breath. You're talking about going public. I already have. But not with you. Not with us. Her jaw tensed slightly. You know what that comes with, right? I do. And I don't care. She leaned against the counter. But I do. Callan's expression softened. I'll do whatever makes you feel safe. But I want this world, our world, to feel like yours too. I want to build a future that doesn't treat you like a shadow. She looked away. I've worked too hard for my peace, Callan. I don't want to lose it because I stepped into your spotlight. You won't lose it, he said. Not if I'm standing in front of you, shielding you from the worst of it. She studied him. He wasn't asking her to perform. He was offering her a place, not beside his money or under his name, but beside his life. Fully, proudly. Zarya's voice dropped to a whisper. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. That night, Zarya lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe the media would get bored, that his world wouldn't chew hers up and spit it out. But part of her still whispered, he's not like you. He doesn't know the price. Still, when she rolled over and found his arms around her again, her body stilled. Maybe this wasn't about disappearing into his life. Maybe it was about letting him step fully into hers. By the following week, Callan had arranged a quiet dinner at Langston House, a luxury restaurant known for its discretion. The kind of place where billionaires made deals and women in silence wrote the terms. He'd reserved a private room, not because he was hiding, but because he knew Zarya wasn't ready to be a headline. Yet, she stood by the window in a sleeveless black dress, her hair in soft waves that caught the dim light. She wasn't trying to be noticed, but there was no way to ignore her. Callan entered, nodding at the maitre d' before making his way to her. She turned at the sound of his steps and let out a nervous breath. I can't believe I'm here. You're not just here, he said. You're stunning. She rolled her eyes, but her lips curved. Let's just survive the night without making the blogs. Deal, he said, offering his arm. As they sat down, Zarya scanned the room. It was filled with power. She could feel it in the posture, in the waitstaff's perfect timing, in the way no one raised their voice because they didn't need to. Everything in here was built to impress without trying. She folded her napkin carefully. I don't belong here. Callan looked at her directly. Then neither do I. Zarya didn't respond, but she reached across the table and touched his hand. Lightly, a signal. She was trying. That was everything. Their waiter brought wine and the conversation began to flow. Business first. He told her about the renovations on a new tech campus in Miami, a merger proposal he'd turned down, and a legal memo she'd helped him think through months ago that just saved them from $1 million PR mess. You think differently, he said. Not with the ego of my boardroom guys. You see angles they miss. That's what happens when you grow up having to think 2 moves ahead just to be safe. Callan nodded slowly. The conversation softened, shifted. He asked about Miles's latest drawings, About Zaria's quiet goal to launch a mobile literacy van for underserved neighborhoods. She hadn't told anyone that yet. "You still think small," he said gently. She frowned. "Excuse me? I don't mean it as an insult. I mean you think with your feet on the ground. That's what I need in my life. Someone who reminds me where the floor is." Zaria let out a breath. "I'm still not used to this version of you." Callan took her hand again, firmer now. "I'm not changing to impress you, Zaria. I'm becoming who I was always supposed to be. With you." Just as dessert arrived, a woman from a neighboring table glanced their way. Then, she did a double take. She leaned toward her partner and whispered, her eyes never leaving Zaria and Callan. Her partner looked too. Zaria's stomach sank. She pushed her fork down, tried to smile through it. Callan noticed. He followed her gaze, saw the subtle glances, and leaned in. "Do you want to go?" She hesitated. "Is it that obvious?" "No," he said, "but your shoulders got tight. And I promised to keep you safe." Zaria shook her head. "They're going to talk. They always do. I'm not ready for headlines." He paused. "Then I'll pull the story before it prints." Zaria's eyes widened. "You can do that?" "I'm not powerless, and if protecting you means delaying our public life for another few weeks, I will." She looked down at her lap, lips tight. "I hate that this even matters." Callan reached across the table again. "You're the only thing that matters." They left quietly. No drama, no cameras. But Zaria felt the change. Even the quietest rooms in his world had eyes. That night, back at her apartment, she paced the living room while Callan changed out of his shirt. "I thought I could do it," she said, arms crossed. "You did." "No, I played brave. But I was one wrong comment away from choking on anxiety." Callan came to stand behind her. His hands found her shoulders. "You don't have to force it." "I can't be half in," she said. "If we're doing this, I need to know I can stand beside you, not behind you. You're not behind me. You're in front of me." She turned to face him, voice shaking. "Then help me feel that." Callan kissed her forehead. "Let's start slow. Pick one event." "1. A charity gala in 2 weeks. Not a big one. Low press. You choose the dress. You choose when we walk in. No pressure." Zaria searched his eyes. "You're serious?" "I won't let anyone own our story but us." Not because she was ready, but because he was. The next morning, Zaria called her sister. "I need you to babysit Miles next Saturday." "Oh? Date night?" "No." "Public step." Her sister paused. "You sure?" "No," Zaria admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." 2 weeks later, the quiet Friday evening felt anything but. Zaria stood in front of her mirror, smoothing down the silk bodice of a deep emerald gown. The neckline was modest, but the fabric clung to her curves in a way she wasn't used to. Her makeup was soft, her curls pinned back with delicate gold clips that shimmered under the bedroom light. Her hands trembled. It wasn't fear of Callan. It was fear of returning to a world that once chewed her up and spat her out. A world that decided who was worthy based on who you knew, what you wore, and how loud your last name echoed in a room. She'd survived it once, but this time, she wasn't hiding. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Callan in a dark suit with a tailored navy coat. No tie, just a black button-down shirt open at the throat. "You look—" "Don't," she said, raising a finger. "If you say stunning, I'll cry before we leave." He smirked. "Then I'll just say, thank you." Zaria blinked. "For what?" "For being the woman who's changing everything." The gala was held at the Kavanaugh Foundation Hall. Marble steps, strings of lights, and a line of luxury cars wrapping the street. It wasn't the Met Gala, but it was enough of a who's who to attract press coverage, socialites, and industry insiders. Zaria clutched Callan's arm as they entered. His hand never left hers. Every time she inhaled, he adjusted, matched her pace, covered her when cameras flashed too long. But people noticed. Whispers traveled faster than light. "She's the girl from the non-profit shoot." I thought he was with that designer last fall. Is she? She's not even. Callan leaned toward her ear. Want to leave? No, Zarya said quietly. Let them look. They walked toward the ballroom entrance, where a large panel display listed top donors. Callan's name was at the top, right under it. In gold script, in partnership with Zarya Blackwell. Her breath caught. You put my name? Callan looked down at her. You're not my shadow, Zarya. You're my legacy. The music swelled as they entered. A dozen heads turned. Some smiled, some didn't, but it didn't matter, because Callan kept his eyes only on her. They sat at a table near the edge of the room, not too close to the stage. Zarya scanned the faces. She saw designers, business leaders, a senator, and even a pop artist she used to sing along to in college, and not one of them mattered more than the man beside her. Still, she felt the heat of attention. A woman in a red gown approached. Tall, sculpted, and familiar. Callan stood. Sylvie, he said. Of course. The ex. She extended her hand to Zarya. I've heard so much. Zarya returned the handshake. Likewise. Sylvie's eyes narrowed. I didn't expect you'd show tonight. Neither did I, Zarya said. Well, you're braver than most, Sylvie replied smoothly. It takes confidence to walk into this world. Zarya met her gaze directly. Confidence or the right man? I have both. Callan touched the small of Zarya's back. Sylvie's lips tightened. I see, she said, then walked off. Zarya exhaled. That was intense. Callan smirked. You handled it like a CEO. Don't tempt me. He leaned in. I already do. Every day. Later that night, as speeches began, Zarya stepped out to the balcony to breathe. The night air was crisp and the city lights danced in the distance. She didn't hear the door open behind her. You always disappear when things get loud, Callan said. It's not the noise. It's the eyes. You mean the ones that envy you? She turned. I mean the ones that think I don't deserve to be here. Callan stepped closer. You didn't come here to impress them, didn't I? No, he said. You came to remember who you are. Zarya looked down at the ring Callan had quietly slipped onto her finger earlier. No proposal, no pressure. Just a quiet promise to build something if she chose to. She looked back up. I'm not scared of the spotlight anymore. Callan took her hand. Then let's make sure it's pointed at the right story. They returned to the ballroom, hand in hand. Not because they had to, but because she chose to, and the room didn't own her anymore. The next morning felt different. Zarya stood barefoot in Callan's penthouse kitchen, still wearing his shirt from the night before. Her curls were tied into a loose bun, and the scent of hazelnut coffee filled the air. She leaned against the marble island, scrolling through news alerts. They'd made headlines. Callan Ryers debuts mystery partner at gala. Who is the woman beside New York's most elusive CEO? Zarya Blackwell, the non-profit strategist who turned a billionaire's head. Zarya laughed softly. Mystery partner? She muttered, sipping her coffee. Callan walked in, freshly showered, wearing joggers and nothing else. Morning, press magnet, he teased. Zarya turned to him. They're eating us up. Let them. The more distracted they are, the less they'll see what we're really building. She tilted her head. And what's that? Callan stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. A life where you never question if you belong. Zarya stilled, letting herself lean into his warmth. For the first time in years, she believed him. Later that day, they returned to Zarya's apartment. She wanted to collect some files, sort through paperwork, and start planning for a potential merge between her non-profit and a mentorship foundation Callan's company supported. She found the folder easily. But, as she reached for an old journal tucked in the same drawer, her fingers brushed against a thick envelope. Her heart skipped. It was sealed, marked with her name, and written in her mother's handwriting. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened it. Inside, there were 2 letters, one addressed to Zaria Blackwell and the other to Callan Ryers. Her chest tightened. She read hers first. My Zaria, if you're reading this, I'm not around to say it to your face. But please know, there was never a day I wasn't proud of the woman you became. You made your own path. You loved with your full heart. You were never afraid of hard things. If a man comes along who makes you second-guess that, leave. But if a man comes along who sees your strength and protects it, don't let pride keep you from joy. I never had that kind of love. I pray you do. Mom. Zaria wiped her face and stared at the second envelope. Callan walked in a moment later, holding 2 matcha drinks from the place down the street. He stopped when he saw her eyes. Zaria? What is it? She handed him the envelope. Callan opened it slowly, sitting beside her. He read in silence, then folded the letter and pressed it to his chest. She wrote this for me? Zaria nodded. She barely knew me. She saw you, Zaria whispered. And maybe she saw what I couldn't see yet. Callan looked at her. I'd never take advantage of something this sacred. I know. I don't want your legacy, he said. I want to protect it. That includes your name, your peace, your voice. Zaria closed the space between them. This isn't about protecting me, she said quietly. It's about choosing each other. Callan exhaled. Then I choose you. Every single version of you. She rested her forehead against his. Even the one with morning breath and opinions on non-profit tax law. Especially that one. They laughed, soft and easy. No weight, no fear, just truth. That night, they met with Callan's legal team to discuss next steps. He was transitioning part of his company into a community-focused branch, and Zaria would oversee its foundation. But she had conditions. I want full hiring control, she said. Callan's lawyer blinked. Of course, and a board of directors with at least 60% female or BIPOC leadership. Done, Callan said, before the lawyer could open his mouth. And the foundation's name? She asked. Callan smiled. Say it. She inhaled. The Eleanor Grace Initiative, named after her mother. Signed, sealed, and filed within the hour. Zaria looked at him across the long conference table. We're building something different, she said. No, Callan replied. You're leading something different. I'm just following where you go. Later, they sat on the penthouse balcony again, this time with wine and no urgency. The city pulsed below them, but the night was quiet. Zaria leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you think we'll mess it up? She asked. Probably, Callan said. But then we'll try again. And again. And again. She smiled. I never pictured this. Me neither. But I'm glad it's you. I've never been more certain of anything, he said. Zaria reached for his hand, laced their fingers together. I'm not afraid anymore. Callan looked at her, serious now. Then, let's stop surviving. She nodded slowly. And start living? He leaned in. No, he whispered. Start loving. And under the hum of the skyline, that's exactly what they did. The invitation arrived in a matte black envelope with gold lettering. Zaria turned it over twice before sliding her finger beneath the flap. Her name was handwritten in elegant cursive across the top. Ms. Zaria Blackwell, Director, the Eleanor Grace Initiative. The event was the New York Philanthropy Awards, hosted at the Metropolitan Center, honoring community leaders and new impact ventures. Zaria's foundation had been nominated for its innovative launch and projected impact. She stared at the details. Formal evening wear. Keynote feature. 2 complimentary seats. Her breath caught when she saw the final line. Award to be presented by Mr. Callan Ryers. Zaria set the card down and sat on the edge of her couch. They hadn't told her that. Callan hadn't told her that. She thought back to the night he first brought her to his gala, how they'd walked in separately and sat in calculated silence for appearances. This time would be different. This time, she'd walk in as herself. as someone seen. The day of the event arrived with a buzz across the city. Zarya stood in front of her mirror in a rich emerald gown. Fitted bodice, off-shoulder neckline, natural curls swept to the side, minimal jewelry, just her mother's earrings. She'd never looked more like a woman who knew her worth. Her phone buzzed. "Callan, car's downstairs. No pressure. Just, I hope you feel proud tonight." She smiled, typing quickly. "Zarya, I do, but not because of the award." "Callan, then why?" She hesitated, then replied, "Zarya, because I didn't lose myself trying to be enough." He read it instantly. 3 dots blinked, then disappeared. No reply. She stepped into the car, heart calm. At the venue, she was ushered to a side entrance for honorees. Flashbulbs sparked at the front, where Callan had already arrived. Alone. When Zarya entered the main ballroom, every eye followed her. But it wasn't about her beauty or dress. It was the presence. She walked with no hesitation. She owned the space without needing to dominate it. When she reached her table, Callan stood. His eyes were soft. He said nothing. But his hand reached for her chair, and she let him pull it out. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. Not as a CEO. As a man choosing stillness. The night moved quickly. Speeches, videos, performances, recognition after recognition. Then, and now, presenting our final honor of the evening, a new award recognizing bold innovation in non-profit leadership. Please welcome Callan Ryers, founder of the Ryers Group. Callan approached the podium. No script, no teleprompter. He glanced toward Zarya once, then spoke. "There's a difference between charity and change," he began. "One gives from surplus, the other demands sacrifice." Tonight's honoree didn't wait for applause. She didn't ask for a stage. She built one for others. He paused. Zarya Blackwell didn't just found the Eleanor Grace Initiative. She redefined what impact looks like. She demanded we look harder, give better, and see deeper. He turned toward her table. She showed me how people began to murmur softly, moved. She made me question the systems I benefited from, and the silence I once called strength. She challenged my company, my comfort, and my ignorance, and she did it with grace. A beat. So no, this isn't just an award. It's a recognition of what happens when a woman refuses to shrink, even when the world asks her to. "Miss Blackwell, please join me." The room erupted in applause. Zarya stood slowly. No nerves, no shakiness, just quiet purpose. As she reached the stage, Callan stepped back, giving her the mic. Their fingers brushed briefly. A soft charge. She looked out at the sea of faces and spoke clearly. "My name is Zarya Blackwell, and I'm not here because someone opened a door for me. I'm here because I built one where none existed. For girls who look like me, for mothers like mine, for communities left behind." She held the award in her hand. "This doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every woman who's been told she's too much or not enough. We are neither. We are exactly what change needs." Silence. Then thunderous applause. People stood, cheered. Some wiped away tears. Zarya stepped down, and Callan met her at the base of the stage. "You spoke truth," he said quietly. "I had to," she replied. They stood there for a moment, letting the noise rise and fall around them. And then, softly, Callan asked, "May I walk you out?" Zarya nodded. She was still holding the award, but his hand on her back. That was the real prize. The city lights blurred outside the window as the car moved through Manhattan. Zarya sat beside Callan in silence, her award resting on her lap. His hand was on the seat between them, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the heat of him. "I didn't know they'd ask me to present," he said finally. Zarya turned to him, quiet. "I believe you." He looked over. "And I didn't say all that to perform. I know." He exhaled, like her words let something inside him breathe again. The car stopped outside her apartment building. The driver got out, but Zaria didn't move right away. She looked at him. "Do you want to come up?" Callan paused, his gaze sweeping her face. "Only if you want me there. I wouldn't have asked if I didn't." He nodded once. They walked inside together. No urgency, no pretense, just choice. Inside her apartment, Zaria set the award down on the console table, kicked off her heels, and turned to him. He hadn't moved past the threshold. "Do you want something to drink?" she offered, voice soft. He smiled. "Water's fine." She moved to the kitchen. Callan followed, but stopped at the entrance, watching her. There was something reverent about the way he looked at her. Not desire, though it was there, but something deeper, grateful, humbled. Zaria handed him a glass. Their fingers touched, and this time, neither pulled away. He followed her to the living room. Zaria sat down on the couch, and he joined her. Still, there was space between them. Not because of fear, but respect. "I've changed a lot since you left," he said quietly. She looked at him, eyebrows raised. "I was building towers and breaking people. I didn't know how to be soft." "You thought softness was weakness," she replied. He nodded. "And you showed me it's the strongest thing of all." The silence between them was warm now. Safe. Zaria turned toward him fully. "Callan, if we do this again, if there's even a possibility, we do it slow, real. No more performative gestures. No pretending we're healed if we're still bleeding." He nodded. "I don't want performance. I want presence." She studied him. "You'd have to learn to be in it. Fully." "I'm learning. Every day." She looked down at his hand resting near hers. Then she placed her fingers gently over his. No fanfare. Just that. They didn't kiss that night. They sat together, speaking quietly until sleepiness pulled at their edges. When Callan left, he kissed her forehead and said, "Thank you for letting me see you again." She smiled. "Thank you for looking this time." Weeks passed. Callan showed up, not with grand gestures, but in little things. He helped set up programs at her center. He learned the names of every young woman in her mentorship group. He asked questions about her mother, her late father, her childhood. He didn't rush. Zaria, too, began to open again. One morning she found a small brown envelope slipped into her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photo of her mother in 1982, standing outside the community building now owned by the foundation. A note attached. "She stood here first. You turned it into a home." Zaria sat on her porch and cried, then smiled. 6 months later, Callan took her hand across a candlelit table at a quiet Harlem restaurant. "You said no performance," he murmured. "But if I told you I still see forever when I look at you, would that count?" Zaria reached for her wineglass, eyes teasing. "Only if you're ready to earn it, one day at a time." He nodded. "I am." That night, when they finally kissed again, it wasn't urgent or desperate. It was certain. It was two people choosing love not for its sparkle, but for its weight. At the next gala, Zaria arrived on Callan's arm, not as an accessory, but as a partner. Her foundation had expanded to 3 cities. His company had added a social responsibility division under her guidance. When reporters asked how they made it work, she smiled and said, "We stopped trying to win and started trying to understand." In the end, Zaria didn't need the world to clap for her. She needed to clap for herself. And in the arms of the man who once used her, she found not redemption, but respect. Because this time, she wasn't his lesson. She was his equal. Zaria didn't get a fairy tale. She got something better: respect, love, and a future she chose for herself. If her journey moved you, if you saw pieces of your own story in hers, don't scroll away quietly. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in her place? Would you have forgiven or walked away? Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and hit subscribe so you never miss a story that speaks truth. Your voice keeps Mr. Charles' stories alive.